Welcome back to The Heat. Venezuelans now have until January 2nd to exchange currency notes the government plans to eliminate. Venezuelan President Maduro has pulled the 100 bolivar note out of circulation before larger bills were available, resulting in long lines at banks, protests, and some looting at stores. A plane arrived on Sunday from Sweden with more than 13 million new 500 bolivar notes. Let's get back to our panel right now. Eric, I just want to pick up where Antonio left us, and he said that some reforms have been made, there's been some success, but they've been undermined by this currency crisis.
I would respectfully disagree with that. I mean, I think any sort of reforms has to be put in quotes and are designed simply to keep the current government on its current path. The real problem is the government itself. The real problem is the economic model that it's pursuing. And until that model is somehow changed, then Venezuela is going to continue to suffer economically. And in fact, anything that might be done on a reform agenda at the margins to try to change, a currency bill here or, something there, is only going to be, as we would say, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. The Titanic is still sinking. It doesn't matter what the chairs on the deck look like. And so the reform agenda really hasn't done anything of note, and that's why I think you're seeing Venezuela in a severe depression, not recession, but depression right now, and 2017 is not going to be a year of recovery. It's going to be further economic distress.
Mark, is it time for a radical overhaul of the Venezuelan economy? Is it time for a new model, as Eric says?
Well, it depends what you mean by a model. I mean, these people like him and his organization have been saying the Venezuelan economy was going to collapse even while it was booming in 2006. From 2004 to 2014, 2004 is a year after the government got control of the oil industry. You can go to 2003 and that would make the numbers look even better for the government. But for that decade, they did very well. Poverty was reduced by half, extreme poverty by 70%. Public pensions for people over 60 tripled. That's why they still have a base at all. That's why 40% of the people still voted for this government in December, even when inflation was already 180% and the economy was in recession. So the model, I mean, when you say the model, the people who hate Venezuela are always trying to say everything's been a failure from the beginning. That isn't true. It's been a failure for 3 years, and it's been a very severe, it is a depression, that's correct. And so the question is this government going to make the necessary reforms to turn the economy around before it gets voted out of office in 2018? That should be the question that everybody's looking at. The reason people don't look at it that way is because so many are preoccupied, as other people have said, with really toppling the government as soon as possible. And that's always been a division within the opposition. There's always been a section that wanted to pursue the electoral route and a part that wanted to use any means necessary to overthrow the government. And you're still seeing that split within the opposition today.
I mean, we might be in a post-truth society right now, but to suggest that we hate Venezuela is just not even, it's just ridiculous.
Just the government, okay.
But having said that, let me just give you one statistic. Mark is great at throwing out statistics which paint a picture which is completely contrary to what the real picture is. Let me just give you one statistic. Poverty today in Venezuela is higher than when Hugo Chavez took office in 1999. That's all you need to know. And to suggest that, everything was, we had higher poverty, lower poverty.
You don't have any statistics.
The fact of the matter is we can't give just random statistics towards some storyline that frankly isn't reality.
Okay, Antonio, you want to say something?
Yeah, that's totally untrue. I mean, whoever goes to Venezuela now will see huge difference from what Venezuela was 20 years ago, 80% of poverty. Today's problems are different from what it was back then. I mean, I remember news articles talking about people buying dog food and babies having to drink the water from the rice and the pasta cooking. So it's totally untrue. Another thing I would like to mention is that, of course, the social improvements, one of the problems that the Maduro government has is that, or one of the dilemmas, I would say, is how to implement economic reform without affecting the social well-being of the Venezuelan people. Everybody knows that following IMF-like policies will have a huge impact socially. And I think the government is preventing of that to happen, especially because we have the experience from 1989, where there were very violent riots, and because of the IMF-like policies were implemented at that time.
Antonio, when you say it'll have an impact socially, what does that mean?
Well, that as I said before, that people will have something to eat. I mean, the crisis right now is especially affected the middle class. The very poor are still very much covered by the social policies of the government, and the middle upper and upper class in Venezuela still live in very good conditions. You have to go to see the restaurants at the east part of the city where the upper middle class, most of the upper middle class lives, and they are totally full every day, and you can find anything you want. Of course, higher prices, they all translate to the consumer, but the crisis, the most affected by crisis is the middle working people.
Right.
But the very poor are still very much covered by the social policies of the government.
Okay. George, I think we've heard from all our guests, all the other guests, that something needs to change, something needs to happen. What do you think needs to happen, even if it's just in the short term?
Absolutely. So we should understand that this crisis of the present moment is grounded in the currency system, in the currency control system. It's not a crisis of the model. As Mark pointed out, that model was performing very well, not only because of high oil prices, but also because it was a successful model. But the currency system spiraled out of control. The government did not respond quickly enough. And that's created situations like today in which you can take a calculation of poverty based on the black market exchange rate and, of course, see a very high number of people in poverty, which doesn't recognize, as Antonio put it, the reality on the ground. If we look at systemic problems, we're talking about a century's worth of problems, not problems of Chavismo. We're talking about the effects of an oil economy, the effects of an economy that imports 90% of its foodstuffs, and that when there's any problem with the import sector or with the oil money coming in to fund that import sector, it becomes very difficult to import what people are demanding on the ground, and you have of course scarcity as a result. But the opposition, to be perfectly clear, has no policy when it comes to this oil dependency. The opposition has nothing, has no alternative, and so it needs to, and so it will turn back to the United States, to the IMF, and to the World Bank, when in reality, it's the radical Chavistas on the ground who are building self-governed economic models on the grassroots level, are the ones who are really thinking about what it would mean to build a Venezuela that can produce what people need to eat, that can produce what they need on the local level, so that they don't rely as much on oil income and imports.
George, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but how do you reconcile that with the fact that there are such severe food shortages, medicine shortages? In fact, one of the reasons people are going into Colombia is to buy medicines and food.
Well, there have been incredibly difficult problems in the import sector, and we need to be careful to parse out shortages from things being actually just simply priced too high for many people to afford them, which is the case with many goods, especially when it comes to price control goods. When you can find them, they're very affordable. When you cannot, and if you can't find them, then they're very expensive in other places. These are very difficult problems that the Venezuelan government has not been quick enough to respond to, and yet the question is, who is providing an alternative to that? Who is putting forth a vision of what it would look like to build a sustainable Venezuelan economy? The opposition is not. Sectors of Chavismo are, and there's a need to stabilize the macroeconomy so that people can really get back in the driver's seat when it comes to pushing this process forward.
Okay, Eric, very quickly, I've just got a few seconds left. Does it surprise you that 1 in 5 Venezuelans support Maduro? 23% at the
He
last
does
count.
maintain about 1 in 5% support. That's right, because there are some benefits that accrue to a certain sector of the population. I think that's right. I think much more interesting is the fact that the support that Chavismo has had over the years has fallen so dramatically, and so that the 20% is now a core group that probably is going to be with the government until the end of time, but that the majority of Venezuelan citizens are clearly looking for change, and they've voted for change, they're asking for change, and that's what they're hoping for.
Okay, that's where we're going to have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us.